Killgo, I turn it over to you.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for your support. Thank you for being just the wonderful people that you are. Um, the, the purpose of this little seminar is just to kind of get people a little more comfortable with what virtual learning really means. I mean, I know technically you know what it means. You sit behind a computer and that's class. But it's a little more than that because there's a lot of things that families don't know. And I have a guest that's going to talk a little more about the family part later on. But from the start, I can't share my screen with you, so I'll just read off my PowerPoint that I have over here. So I kind of put this in two categories, do's and don'ts. During this pandemic, because if you know, it started in March, and kind of everybody was just thrown into this thing, just boom, and we had to adjust on the fly, so to speak, because there's a lot of information that people did not have in terms of how to manage online learning and the effectiveness of it from elementary school to middle school to high school, because it has a different effect on each grade level because of the way that it's set up. And one of the key things, one of the first things I'd like to talk about, and this goes with the school and the family, is routines. In order for virtual learning to be effective, you have to have a routine. It's no different than when you were in brick and mortar, where you would go, you go to eat dinner at a certain time, you do your homework at a certain time, you go to bed, you get up. Those same routines have to be put in place. I know they're different now because everybody's schedule is wacko. It's crazy, but you've got to figure out a way to set up a routine so that, particularly with the smaller ones, because it is most of them don't see their students, don't see their teachers, but maybe twice a week, depending on what kind of school system. I know Montgomery County versus Prince George's County, DC, kind of are all a little different, but for the most part, they're not with their teachers like every day, like they would be if they were in brick and mortar. So these routines are essential because once you get them down, then that way they don't lose any time. Because what has happened, which I have noticed as teaching, that because the parents' lives changed, the children's lives have changed substantially. But in the terms of them education, it can't. They have to stay on track because this may be the new norm for a while. Who knows? It's not really a new situation, but it's certainly new to a lot of people. So that routine of making sure that they log in on time. And how do you do that? Parents have to have the students' schedules. I have so many parents come to me and say, I'm talking, I got to pick my child up from school. I say, well, what class is he or she in? I don't know. No. You've got to have the child's schedule. If you got to put it on the refrigerator, you got to put it in the bathroom, wherever you got to put it, you got to know what their classes are because it's a little confusing. For instance, like we have what they call self-paced days. These are days where students don't necessarily see the teacher, but you're there to support if they need some instruction or there's something going on with their computer or, but they still self-maintenance. That schedule, like our schedule is like on Mondays and Thursdays, I don't really see my kids. I see them Tuesdays and Fridays, and then Wednesdays a half a day. So I don't know what school systems, your children and grandkids are in, but you need to get that schedule and you need to post that schedule so that you know what it is, so that if they change class, for instance, sometimes they're in an AP class, it may be too much for them, so they get switched and they're in another class. You just don't want that confusion because that prevents them from staying engaged. Because it is really hard to keep them engaged for, the 30 or 40 minutes that we have them online. But if they have their routine, they're up at a certain time, they're signing into this class at a certain time, and you know their schedule, they can't tell you, oh, by the way, I didn't, whose class you're supposed to be in? Well, I don't know whose class. No, they have to have the schedule, and you can get them. You can download those schedules from the school, website, and you can get them from their teachers, which rolls into the next part of the discussion about school contacts. You must have the principal's number, the teacher's number, and email addresses, any administrators, deans, or whatever that manage the school, because you got to have somebody that you can stay in touch with that can keep you updated with the latest information in terms of if there's any changes. So as part of this routine, part of the schedule, not only having the child's schedule posted, but also the school calendar. Got to have the school calendar. Okay. Because it's, let me see if I can maybe share my screen. I don't know. I'm gonna try it. Give me a second. He's looking kind of crazy right now. No, okay. We'll keep going. I'll figure it out in a minute. So, because there are very important dates that must be maintained, particularly when grades come out. All schools have testing, okay? So like we're going into testing season now, and again, every school system has its own set of whatever it does. But you need to know what days they test on. You need to know what days they're not going to be in class. You need to know what days they self-paced. You need to know all those things have to be kind of in black and white. And I found out if just take the time to pull those few little things together, will make your life a whole lot easier, because all you have to do is look and say, okay, today, Wednesday is self-paced. All you got to do, you're going to go in and check. But that gives you an opportunity for them not to tell you they don't have class, because they will do that, especially when they get up to high school level. They'll try to tell you, oh, we don't have class today. Yes, you do. You're in Mr. Such and Such class. So the routines, the schedules of everything, because it changes. Now for us, it changes every semester. So what was this semester is not going to be next semester, and keeps on going. We have 4 semesters in the year, or 4 advisories that equal 2 semesters. So they change classes. So you need to keep the most current class schedule so that you make sure that you're in, that they're on point. Then every parent has the ability to be emailed into, it's called, well, I don't know what, again, different school systems. It's called Power School. Power School is a tool that monitors attendance and monitors grades. Okay, and unfortunately, what has happened, I don't think people really understand the importance of it. How schools get funded, all schools, is how many students are in class. And with this virtual piece, the attendance is key, mandatory. They cannot be, unless they're really sick, they need to be logged into these classes, because they don't get, they're called seat hours. And these seat hours add up. So when they get to graduation, if they don't have enough seat hours, they don't graduate. Okay. And OSSE, which is the organization, the Office of Superintendent Schools, and that runs most of the education, is the person or the organization that monitors attendance and grades, particularly once they get to high school, because they have to have community service hours. Now, you can't get community service hours because it's COVID. You can't really do that easily, but there are some virtual online things that they can do to get these community service hours. And right now for high school in DC, it's 125 hours. So, which is not crazy, but it is crazy if you wait till you get to the 12th grade to decide, oh, wow, nobody asked me about my community service hours. Okay, you need those to graduate. So it sounds like a lot to have to maintain yourself, but that's the only checks and balances that the students are going to have is you being able to know what their schedules are, what the contact people are, and how to manipulate or get into these platforms. So back to the grading part. Their test scores, their attendance, and their class participation all play into their grades, even virtually. So it is not hard for you to join into their classes. If I could show you right now, one of the strongest platforms that we use is called Google Classroom. Let me see if I can pull this up, because you need to see this. Google Classroom is a Google platform that basically most of the students, that's where they get their instruction. Zoom is basically done for classroom management. That's what that's really for. But the Google Classroom is actually where they actually go to get their instruction. Let's see if I can pull up a Google Classroom for you. It says open system preferences. It's not doing it because I can't share this screen. No. Google Classroom allow Zoom to share your screen. Open. Yes. I'm trying to get it. I want to pull up an example of this Google Classroom so you can see what it looks like. But it's not letting me do it for some reason. But I'll explain it to you.
Are you saying that they have both? They're going to have Google Classroom and Zoom?
Yes. Zoom is for classroom management. That's what we have to take a picture. Like I can go up to my camera in my computer and I take their picture along with their attendance. This is mandated by OSSI because this is how we prove that these kids are actually in class. So they gave them, they call them prison signs, but they're not prison signs. They gave them, you know, little signs to put under their names so that they could take a picture because it's imperative. You just really don't understand how important that the attendance is. So in the Google Classroom format, Google has a whole package of things. I mean, it's a lot to manage. But what we use mostly is Google Classroom, Google Slides, Google Docs, and what's the other one? It's four that we primarily use. Well, you upload documents that you can load into the classroom. You can upload videos that you load into the classroom. You can do the best learning tools are PowerPoints or Google Slides because you can put your agenda on there, your objectives, what student outcomes, what you want them to learn that day. Because you have to remember, like for me, I only see my students twice a week. So if I teach them something on Tuesday and by Friday, you know, that may be gone. So it's good to have the Google Slides because you can go back and reteach if you have to, in order to make sure that they're staying on point. You also can load in Google Forms. Google Form is like a, how would you do it? It's like a survey in a way, but you can put lessons in it. So, and you can determine whether you want them to check the box, circle the answer, or whatever you have. So on my self-paced days, I give them Google Forms. So basically they go in and do the assignment. It's like 1 question, 2 questions, something easy, and that's their attendance. So we have to collect attendance. Even when I don't see them, I have to collect attendance. Because this attendance piece is critical. That's for everybody. Going by. But now, and also, if I could show you this, in Google Classroom, when I load the students' names in, I can load your email address in as well. So when I send emails out with the passcodes, with any kind of situation that I need to talk to the student about, you have the authority to go into the Google Classroom and see what it is. You can also, as I invite you to their classes, I can invite you to their classes and you can join in to the class. So that's the beauty of the Google Classroom, is that you can also monitor what's going on, what they're doing. Are they turning their assignments in? Because you go to, it's got 4 basic modules, you know, assignments, classwork, and so on and so forth. And you log into that, and it's really user friendly. Google Classroom is pretty user friendly. It's not a lot of, you know, manipulating. It's pretty cut and dry, and it's pretty, you know, pretty straight ahead in terms of what they're going to be doing. But it gives you the ability, gives the parent the ability to monitor the work. So if they say, well, did Mr. Killgo give you homework or give you an assignment today? And he said, no, you can go right into Google Classroom, pull it up and say, well, what is this? Okay? Right, because you know they're going to tell you I ain't giving them work. You know, yeah, they're going to say that. But you can monitor it, and in Google Classroom, if they could get Power School and Google Classroom to talk, then when you I give them a grade there, it automatically go into Power School. But that'd be too easy. So it ain't doing it right now, but it would really be the ultimate. So try to familiarize yourself as much as you can with Google. It's not really, like I said, it's not really hard. And you can post all the information. So when you go into the classroom, you can see what the code is. You can see what the assignment is. You can see whether they did it or not. You can see everything that is going on with that student in terms of what they have to do for school. Okay. And the last part of the Zoom piece, the issue they were having with Zoom, it was that the kids posted a Instagram page and put all the passwords on it. Okay. Yeah, right. So you had people coming into the classroom from Kentucky, or from, I don't know where they was coming from, to interrupt this class. So the security part of Zoom is important. But when you set the Zoom classroom up, the Zoom up, there's a way to prevent that from happening. There's a bunch, when you start setting up these meetings, when you go down the list, so no one can get into the classroom unless you let them in. And if you, for instance, if they put in a code or some kind of nickname or something in the box, when you go to let them, you don't have to let them in. Because you say, well, and we don't let the children put anything in there but their first and last name. Not boo-boo dance team, all that. They don't do that. It has to be that way. And also, it is also for administration, because in the Google Classroom, administration can also, you have to invite them, but invite them into your class. And that's how they do observations of how you're teaching. But they also observe how the students are responding to the information, as well as what they are actually doing. So everything has an accountability, and Google is the strongest method for doing that. And plus, you can print it all out as well if you wanted a hard copy of it. It would give you that option. And as far as the Zoom is being able to make sure it's private. We try not to keep the kids on Zoom more than a half an hour, 30 minutes. Unless it's really something intricate that you want them to do, 30 minutes should get it done. The first 5 minutes, they do attendance, come in, open up Google Classroom, start on the lesson. Once they get going and know the instructions, basically, unless they need some help, because we have tutoring later on in the week, then they can come back to you later to get the assistance. But again, routines, schedules, knowing the school context, get all the calendars printed out so you know when the holidays are and the breaks and all that stuff, and familiarizing yourself with the Google Classroom. The last part before I turn it over to Ms. Jeffries is some of the things that you don't do. Here's some of the don'ts. One of the things is don't spend all day on the computer. You've got to build in breaks. You cannot sit there and stare at those screens all day long. Like everybody here got glasses on, I bought a special pair of glasses just for the computer, because you can't, it's just physically on your eyes and on the kids' eyes. So that doesn't mean they get off of Zoom and go on Fortnite and play games all the rest of the day. That's not, they've got to build some kind of break in there for them to stay, so that they won't, burn themselves out. Because this is really harder than teaching in brick and mortar. It really is, because there's so many loopholes and so many things you've got to be responsible for. The next part of the don'ts, to make sure that they don't go on unsafe websites. Because number one, most of the computers that a lot of our students have are owned by the school. Okay, so that means if they go on something that's inappropriate or something that is not correct, when the school gets that computer back, guess what? It's still on there. Okay, and there have been a whole lot of people who, did some goofy stuff because nobody was paying attention. Okay, and it came back to bite them, because it don't. Once you put it on here, it's on here. That's just the reality of it. And so you need to make sure you're monitoring the websites that they go on. Plus, you don't want to get on anything that's going to give you a virus or anything crazy like that, because then that'll shut down and lock down the whole computer. And then you'll be going back up to school to get another computer because you can't do anything on it. So those things need to be monitored. And again, giving out passwords. I don't know why they want to do that, but we just try to maintain as much security as possible. And then the last part is just inappropriate conversations. Most of these things are recorded, okay? And so if you're engaged in something that is not okay going on, or something that's inappropriate, it's recorded. Okay, and all they gotta do, and when you end the Zoom class, it goes into an envelope that stays in the computer. So you could go back and pick it up, and you can try to erase it if you want to. It won't go away. It's still on the hard drive. So we just want to be as mindful as we can be about safety, because I think safety is one of the key things. But also, how to make this a little less hectic for the parent and a little less hectic for the kids, is that if everybody knows what's going on, then I think we can move this thing forward. And and again, how long it's going to be like this, I have no idea. But those are some of the tips that I can share with you about how to monitor Google Classroom, how to monitor Zoom and their work as they matriculate into school. Any questions?
I have a question about what's the Power, whatever that tool's called?
It's called Power School.
Power School?
Yeah, Power School. It's a platform. Now, again, Montgomery County might use something called something else, but what it does, essentially, it's where you put the attendance and where you put in the grades. And also,
so when you get access to Google Classroom, is it the same access that takes you into Power School? Or
no, you can, the school can give you access to Power School, because basically we have all the parents' email addresses, so we forward all of those logins to you.
Okay.
So you can go in there and ask and say, well, what grade do you have in such and such class? Oh, I'm passing. I got a B, and you go in there and it's an F.
Yeah.
Like, okay, yeah, you know what I'm saying. So the parents, that's a lot of the control that the parents can have, is being able to log into everything that the student logs into, to make sure that they stay on track. I mean, if they know what's going on, the less goofiness will happen. And again, if they really, really have to take this very seriously, because this attendance and these community service hours, and also they're responsible for, will come back to haunt them if they play around with this at all. This is not something they can just take casually. And I didn't feel good today, so I'm not logging in. And that's not the way. So at this time, I would like to introduce this young lady. I've known her for quite a while. She's the mother of my 4 grandchildren, but I thought it would be very appropriate for her to share with you what she does to monitor, because she's got 3 kids online in school, and a little baby boy running around at the same time, as well as going to work. Okay, so those are, she's doing the octopi thing, and I'd like just for her to share a little bit of that with you. Kyra Jeffries, right here.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, and I appreciate you guys allowing me to join you this evening. As my dad mentioned, I'm the mother of 4 wonderful children, 3 of which are doing virtual learning. We live in the Dallas area, so believe it or not, we're 4 weeks into school already. Time is truly flying, but the good news is I've survived and I'm still here. So hopefully that gives you guys some hope, as well as you guys embark upon this journey of virtual learning. What I wanted to do today is just share a couple of tricks of the trade that I've learned over the past few weeks that have helped me navigate through the virtual experience, and hopefully they'll also be helpful to you guys as well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to share my screen. Let me know if it does not work or you can't see it. And I'm sorry in advance for the screaming in the background, but that is my toddler, my 2-year-old, who is not in virtual school.
We do see your screen.
You can see my screen. Okay, cool. All right. So as I'm going through this, feel free to stop me, ask questions. I'm known to talk fast, so slow me down at any time. But what I wanted to start with was some guiding principles that I think are really important. And I'll dive into 5 of the 6 of these on the individual slides that follow this initial slide. So establishing a learning environment is important. Getting organized, understanding the technology and tools, as my dad mentioned earlier, creating healthy habits, motivating and rewarding, and most importantly, not giving up, because it can be hard and it can be a bit daunting, but this too shall pass, and we'll get to the other side of this, and you can successfully navigate through this with your children or grandchildren or whoever you're helping with virtual learning. All right, so let's jump into creating an environment for learning. So the picture that you see on the right-hand side is actually a picture of the environment that I set up for my kids a couple of days before they started school. This is for my 2 elementary school kids. I mean, what I did was I put all the school supplies that they needed to keep them organized and focused. And I think it's actually helped them a lot. And it actually created a kind of cool experience, since they weren't going into a brick and mortar school just to feel like they're stepping into a pseudo classroom. So the key points here are to dedicate an area in your home to run virtual school and try to use that same environment every day for them. Also setting up working stations with all their school supplies so they have things at their disposal is also very important. And a little essential thing also is comfortable seating. Now I know, budgets are different and all that stuff, but just creating or setting up their chairs with cushions or whatever it is if they're comfortable, right? I mean, they're sitting at these screens for 7, 8, 9 hours a day, and it can be pretty hard on them. So any questions before we move forward with the next slide?
Nope, this looks good.
All right, let's keep rolling. So the next one is get organized. For me, this is essential with all the hats that I wear, but I think it's important for all of us. So one of the things that I do is I leverage my personal calendar to keep track of my kids' calendars. So again, my kids are all virtual, and during the day they have asynchronous and synchronous times. So that means they're online with the teachers at some point, and then they're doing independent learning at some point. I found that my kids lose track of when they actually need to get back online on Zoom to do their in-person interaction. And so what I've done is I've put on my calendar the times in which they need to be back in class. And I get up and I go in there and I check on them to make sure that they're logged in, because otherwise they run the risk of missing out on some very essential interactive learning with their teachers, in addition to being potentially marked absent for a certain segment of the day. The other thing is to establish time for weekly prep. So on this end, they send out weekly lesson plans via Google Classroom every Sunday. So I use my Sunday evenings to go in, take a look at what the kids are doing for the week, understand if there are certain supplies that they need to do some of the activities, and I try to set everything up for them so that Monday morning they can walk in, hit the ground running. And also for me, I'm dealing with getting ready for work and stuff like that, and it just helps to avoid the Monday mayhem, for lack of better words. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we'll keep going. Mm-hmm. So understanding technology and tools, and my dad hit on this pretty well, but I don't consider myself to be super tech savvy, but I do think it's important that we gain a baseline understanding of the tools and apps that our kids are using. Google Classroom, Google Docs, Zoom, Seesaw, I mean, there are a million different applications. So wrapping your head around which ones your children or grandchildren have to use is important. And then what I did for the ones that I wasn't that familiar with, I went on YouTube, right? I looked up some tutorials. They have teacher tutorials and stuff like that. And so I just learned how to use them. The other thing that I did is I leveraged my kids, right? Sometimes they know more and are better than the YouTube tutorials, and they can quickly teach you, how to use the functionality. The only risk is that they can also trick you and not show you certain things so that you're not able to monitor them as well. So maybe a combination of your YouTube plus your children or grandchildren would be a good idea. And then the last tip of the trade here is, if you're having trouble with some of the apps, or your children or grandchildren are as well, scheduling time with the teachers to talk through your questions so that you're able to use the technology optimally. Because in this environment, not knowing how to use a tool, or your kids not knowing how to use a tool, can definitely be to their detriment. All right, I'll keep rolling. So the next one is creating healthy habits, right? A lot of the kids are not doing organized sports anymore. They don't have physical education classes. So they really need the opportunity to shake it out a little bit. And so what I've established is daily brain breaks. Get up, stretch, get out of the environment, just get yourself back together so that you can focus is one. But then also increasing their outdoor activities while the weather is still nice. So during their recess and lunch periods, I force them to go outside and do some sort of activity. They have to, because they need to get their blood flowing. And in the evenings, we also try to do walk the dog, do a bike ride, just do something, again, to just keep them more active since they don't have those structured activities throughout the day. And the last thing, and I think my dad hit on this as well, is minimizing screen time, right? And it kind of seems like a punishment to some extent, but it's better for them, right? They're in front of these screens for 9 hours a day, and then they go from this to Fortnite or this to their iPad and stare at it for another 4 hours. It's just not really creating healthy habits, which we want to do. My favorite, motivate and reward. I think this is important. It keeps everyone happy and sane to some extent. So establishing a reward system that encourages your children or grandchildren to complete their assignments on time and with accuracy. Because it's easy to miss assignments, it's easy to do them haphazardly, right? And skip a lot of steps, which is not good either. And so, my 7-year-old loves Barbies, my 10-year-old loves to play on his video games, my 15-year-old loves shopping. So their rewards are associated with, them doing their work properly. The other thing I would say is to avoid punishment initially, right? So it takes some time for the kids to get in sync and to transition into online learning. So missing a few assignments or being a little bit disengaged, I would say give them some grace initially. And then I would say establishing that rewards program will help them get themselves in order a lot quicker. Yeah. Last point here, I would say reward yourself as a parent, grandparent, guardian, whatever you are. It's not easy, right? You have to give yourself some breaks and also pat yourself on the back and give yourself some grace because you're doing a lot. You're doing your daily routines, whatever that may be, plus now helping, students navigate online learning. And again, my last point is don't give up. You got this. We'll all get through this. And I'm hoping that, the information that I've shared will also help you more seamlessly transition into virtual learning. And that's really all I had. And I'll pause if there are any questions.
All right. Very good.